One of the absolute massive reboots for Palantir over the last 4 or 5 months has been public relations and marketing. Dr. Alex Karp himself has said that they did hire somebody to coach them in public speaking and more marketing, more public relations. Right now, Dr. Alex Karp is doing a European tour. Yesterday, he was in Copenhagen, Denmark, and today he did an interview in Spain. This interview is absolutely ridiculous. It's 25 minutes of hard-hitting questions where he basically says, fuck what you heard. Palantir sued the US Army. We won. Palantir actually works, did work, is working, and will work. Palantir is for freedom. Palantir is for making profits. And Palantir is for being ethical. Palantir is all about making you more secure, and Palantir is all about making you more efficient. This is a 25-minute interview. I highly suggest that you guys watch it. It's absolutely remarkable. And if you don't get anything else from this specific video, just understand this. Dr. Alex Karp and Palantir as a whole have been doing a shit ton of interviews. Many more interviews in the last 4 months than they did in the prior year. It's all about getting eyes on Palantir. It's all about getting in front of the ears so people can actually hear what Palantir is all about. Earlier today, I did a live with Ahmet, shout out to Ahmet, and we did a poll. How many people actually use Bard or ChatGPT on a daily use case? How many people that are invested in Palantir, Google, Microsoft, all about AI, actually use AI? And overwhelmingly, I think like 70% said, no, they don't. So it is still really early with a projected total addressable market of nearly $2 trillion in the next decade, not to mention defense budget going up to over $1 trillion within the next decade. Palantir is still stupid early and definitely has the potential, which is not guaranteed, but a potential to get that 5, 10 plus X in the future. Guys, enjoyed this interview, and this is actually one of the better interviews that Dr. Alex Karp has had in quite a while. He's very humorous in this, he is very charismatic in this, and although he is very joking in this interview, he definitely gets his points across, and I absolutely love it. Thank you so much, and please give me the like, share, and subscribe. Without further ado, enjoy the rest of this video.
Teaching that model all the 50,000 things it can't ask, answer, data feeds it can't have, it's very hard. Which is why our adversaries would love us to talk and spend tons of time talking about how we can't implement these things, and then people who don't have products tell us that they can't implement these things. So it's like, it's funny, I tell people this, but we spend a lot of time providing an energy, investing in things that scare our adversaries. I have a huge admiration in those adversaries, and that admiration should lead us to saying, how do we invest where we are legitimately better than they are?
While many people perhaps recognize Palantir for its alleged involvement in capturing bin Laden, perhaps it's less known that your software, your platform has evolved and has been addressing all the global crises of the moment, from the war on terror in the United States, but also here in Europe, to border control, to natural disaster relief, then the fight against the pandemic, now the war, where Palantir is not only supporting the Ukrainian armed forces in planning operations and acquire military targets, but also it's helping NGOs to manage the influx of refugees and also activists to investigate war crimes. What's next for Palantir in this path of evolution? What are you working right now that you can share with us?
Well, yeah, our biggest focus right now is just rolling out the things we've built to wield large language models, getting that into a form where we can scale it, embarrassing people who are purveyors of PowerPoints, but honestly care about that a lot less in commercial. I do care when people go to governments, we don't really spend a lot of time. It's like we're building these things, whether it's, again, the dynamic knowledge model so that the large language model can actually understand your enterprise, the security around it, the handoff function, seeing if some of the things we built in the context of like that knowledge model can actually make large language models more reliable in the intermediate data range. So not with small data sets and not with infinite ones where could be a lot of value and there's not a lot of focus. And then we rely on our unfortunate bias that the world is getting more dangerous, more disjuncted. And the more dangerous and more disjuncted it is, the more valuable, powerful software will be. So it's not like we didn't predict the value of Foundry for COVID. We didn't. It's true. I thought that the war in Ukraine would happen, but I didn't think years ahead. I just thought when I saw the data. But the products that are useful in these contexts, we're building on it. Now we're, again, we're scaling U.S. commercial really with a very, very nascent, new and learning how to do it Salesforce at a pretty anomalous rate for any company, but for a company that is 20 years old, completely, shockingly exceptional. And as a company that's primarily focused on value, not on sales, I believe an N of one.
In your public appearances and interviews, you have stressed that the importance of know-how versus money, and that medium powers such as Spain and other Southern European countries can leapfrog their security and their defense game with the right tools. Palantir has been working here in Spain for 4 years. What can you tell us about the work you are doing here? And from your perspective, are we doing it right? Are we working in the right
I've been told I
direction?
can't say anything about our role in Spain.
I have to try it.
So that's what I've been told, and we have Palantirians out here waiting to jump on stage. There's a whole list of words and things that they're ready to intervene on at any second. But my guidelines here were Spain is a wonderful country. We know it very well. I love the food. I understand when I'm being yelled at in Spanish, which is true. And I'm very happy to come here, and we have people who like us we can't mention. That's what I was told to say.
But I understand that Southern Europe plays a role in the global strategy of Palantir.
Yes. Well, again, I'm very bullish, again, without mentioning anything about individual users of Palantir. But what I've seen in this country is the people we interact with are very strong partners. So it's a very direct feedback loop. We have deep experience on the implementation of anti-terror products, products for special forces, products for identifying enemies. And so the dialogue is one of like deep knowledge, but also willingness to ask us how would you use these products effectively. And then there's a lot of engineering talent here. I think Spain is probably underestimated in the depth of engineering talent. We don't underestimate Spain. And quite frankly, my Palantirians love working here with our Spanish clients. And it may be a bigger problem that like everybody who speaks Spanish wants to be here, including some people who barely speak Spanish. It's like, you're like, oh no, I speak Spanish. And like, it's like, where did you learn it? Well, I've watched some movies in English.
Some songs.
Yeah.
Palantir recently achieved profits in the last quarter of last year, and again, it's expected that you stay in profit all this year. And Palantir's goal, in your own words, is to become the leaders in constitutional and ethical use and monetization of AI in America within 2 years. How are you going to?
Well, I think we're the leader already, but in 2 years, your so-called experts will acknowledge it. So it's like but yes. And by the way, one of the things that you're, I think, alluding to though is if you say like ethical AI, it sounds like I don't mean you, but it sounds like, oh, AI that doesn't work. But What we actually mean is, in the military context, AI that's deadly scares the bejeebers, or trying to use less foul words, out of our enemies. And it's precisely dangerous because it can work within a framework that is allowed within our countries. So you have access to every bit of data you're allowed to have access to. You're not allowed to have access to data. You can use proprietary data, but in a way that is segmented. It's an interesting thing and very counterintuitive, but it's not that the ethics and the efficacy are in contradiction. It's that the efficacy and the ethics are linked and are in a kind of a relationship where they can only be a combustion agent where they confront each other. And so it's not like one of the things that people believe, and I don't want to fight about all the time, because it's like they believe if you got rid of the ethics, you would have better AI. But in reality, like if you look at adversaries, getting rid of the ethics would mean actually, in their way of seeing it, imposing weird, odd, non-ethical constraints on the large language models, and they won't even work. And also in the commercial context, certainly in the U.S., but a non-ethical AI is not implementable in your enterprise, so it's completely academic. And the chief issue you have as an enterprise is that while you're convinced your enterprise has world-class software, the person down the street who had a business much weaker than yours is going to out-implement you potentially with our products and going to change the margins of their business to such an extent that you are going to have a competitive disadvantage you may not be able to dig your way out of. By the way, this is the variability of outcome is something that Europe needs to think about a lot, because the American landscape is going to commercial, so less relevant and less important than some of the issues we're dealing with. But the variability of willingness to try technology, so we have very big European clients and they're embracing it, but as a generalization, this is going 5, 6, 7 times faster in America. And the effect on efficiency, safety, margins is going to be enormous. And I view myself as, I spent a lot of my life in Europe, parts of my family, lived in Europe for 1,000 years. We have to be, those of us who are legitimately wanting the West to work means Europe works very well, America works better. This is something that we need a much higher level of concern about.
And I imagine for this purpose of becoming leaders, if you are not already, the dual use of the technology, the civilian purpose is important, because many people may wonder what is going to do an AI defense platform for my business. I don't know if you.
Well, I mean, it just like the example that is bandying around for our platform. Very simply, you have Palantir powers, I think 10-15% of all hospital beds in America. You have but the same thing you had in COVID. You have 1 million hospital beds and 2 million patients. How do you select the patients that are the most efficacious for you? Okay, well, it's not just financial, because there's huge ethical concerns about who gets a bed, who should get a bed, that may actually be anti-correlated to what your algorithm wants you to do. But if you can bring the algorithm and your ethics in harmony, you change the margins of your business at both top line and bottom line enormously. Or you're doing research on you're an insurance provider and you have to read millions and millions of documents. You're doing research on for the pharmaceutical industry. You have to understand every bit of research in the world. You have 1,000 people working on that. You can increase their productivity by 10x as long as you can titrate the information so that it doesn't go into your core store of truth, because there's some portion of that is unreliable, and some decisions that can't be made without bringing that information into an environment where its veracity can be tested to a point where you can make $1 billion, $2 billion, $3 billion investment decisions.
As we have said, you have a unique profile for a CEO of a defense tech company, indeed for any CEO. And perhaps that particularity is reflected in how Palantir's approach to some business, because you have made some bold moves. For example, in the beginnings, you didn't want to sell your product to five-star generals in bases or headquarters, but you travel to the front lines and sell the product to the soldiers and commanders on the Afghan battlefields. And for example, you also sue the US Army because you were not treated fairly. This FinDef edition is focused on innovators and startups, and I don't want you to recommend them to sue the Spanish Army.
Well, by the way, we sued the US Army not to buy Palantir, we did something very valuable for every entrepreneur in the world. We sued the US Army so that they would have to buy products that were proven to work, not products that were proven on a 4,000-page PowerPoint.
But
so that wasn't buy Palantir, it was buy Works. And honestly, maybe one of the most important things we ever did for the United States of America, not just for us, but for everyone, including the entrepreneurs you're referencing, because it's very hard to compete. You know, we have limited resources in our country. We have to be very careful in investing, judicious. And by the way, you know, we have to defend this not just to our allies, I would say people who broadly are realistic about the nature of defending our countries, but also to our skeptics who would like nothing more than to point to programs that don't work so that they can get rid of some of the programs that do work and that we need for our very survival and our rule of law. So if you know, there's an expression in French, qui aime bien châtie bien, which basically means if you care about someone, you're kicking them in the fanny occasionally. And that was an act of great caring for my country. And it was not, you know, directly, and of course, it has helped Palantir just like it's helped every innovative company. I randomly run into companies, European companies, that are now selling into America, and sometimes, you know, doing their best to compete against us. And they're like, you know, Dr. Karp, I love you, and it's because of that. Yeah.
But do you have some crucial lessons that you can share with our entrepreneurs, some advice that you would give them?
Yeah, build something that you find something you believe in, surround yourself by other people who believe in it, make sure that they're exceptional, raise more money than you think you need, never stop raising money, which in the American context means when you run into venture people, tell them how stupid they are immediately and always, because their basic view is if I was as talented as this person is, I'd be even a greater asshole than I am. Of course, many of them, some of my best friends, some of them are, but you really have to be careful about being nice because they'll equate that to be weak. And you know, you're going to have to fight hard and long. Certainly, if you're in the enterprise context, in government context, this is a very, very long process. You have some advantages if you're in a NATO country because you can work with any NATO country, and you could also have access to the United States of America, which is the most important defense market in the world, and one that's open to buying software pretty much from anywhere, and other products, hardware products. And be wary of the experts. You really, put it this way, if the experts all love you, run for the hills, find another idea, because that just means that the idea is dated, and that 50,000 people are going to be doing it. It's reached, either it's reached its peak price, and or it's highly competitive. And I tend to think it's almost always wrong. So, that doesn't mean that every idea has to be insane and every insane idea is ipso facto valuable. But you want to be really careful. If you can identify 5 experts and they love the idea, you really want to be hanging out with your buddies who are kind of off piste, and they really like the idea. That's the better idea.
You have said many times that Palantir lives in a constant dichotomy, in a duality, walking a fine line between security and privacy, sovereignty and profit. And all we know that defense companies have challenging public relations. You yourself have faced criticism from activists and some misunderstanding even from your peers in Silicon Valley. And
by the way, you mentioned that, and I just want to clarify, not all of it is a misunderstanding. Many of the people who don't like us completely understand what we stand for. And I'll tell you what we stand for. The West winning, strong defense, deterrence, competence, money well spent, no waste. We believe that violence should only be used in the constitutional framework on the battlefield, but we support the use of violence in that context. Many of our adversaries do not support warfighters, think warfighters are bad people, and in general would like to not associate with warfighters or people involved in intelligence. And we're honored to support those people. And many of those people looked at me like I was a crazy person coming into their base and their headquarters. And we may not agree on every political issue, but I have great reverence for those young men and women who put their life at risk. And it's not a misunderstanding that we support them. It's not a misunderstanding that we support America. It's not a misunderstanding that we're proud that agencies use our product. It's not a misunderstanding that even though we don't always agree with every decision about internal politics and war, that we are broadly supportive of working with Western allies, so everybody who's in NATO and America, that we think the long-term benefits of supporting these institutions are crucial. It is a misunderstanding, but I don't really believe that people who misunderstand it really misunderstand it, that we are somehow eviscerating data, exporting data to third parties, taking products that are used in Europe and the data somehow ends up in America, that we're not the world's leader in data protection, civil liberties. By the way, we've made a ton of money because of our focus on that. And a lot of the people who misunderstand that are either not a misunderstanding it, but they equate likability, meaning they don't like me because I'm pro you, with never being right, which is a dangerous way to argue. And this is something I would tell young entrepreneurs. The minute you go into this death trap of cognitive decline, that the person you don't like is wrong, you are really, really missing the opportunity to go deeper on their thought process and get ideas that will be crucial for your survival. B, we struggle because in some of our platforms have no competition. So if you can't compete with Palantir, you sure as hell can malign us. And C, I'm not everyone's cup of tea. It's okay. I never was. Honestly, I'm pretty popular in some places now. I can't even believe it. I'm like, what is this? Even a couple experts like me. And, I don't know. And it's mainly because I've learned that I have to bash experts and venture capitalists to be loved in Silicon Valley, to be loved by them. So I tend to think, and I'll tell you, the other thing I would say is, to all you critics of Palantir, please continue, because we have attracted and retained the best people in the world over a 20-year period, not a 2-year period before the startup gets acquired, not a 5-year period before you go public and everybody leaves, a 20-year period. And one of the main reasons is every time you say the world's dumbest thing about Palantir, the smart person in the room says, it can't quite be that simple. Let me let me see how their architecture actually works. Let me see how they unify a fanatical focus on civil liberties with making big tendies. Let me see if this weird thing they've called an ontology actually could power LLMs. Let me see if those LLMs could actually need a data protection civil liberties platform that's been built over the last 20 years to actually work. Let me see why they are succeeding in the US at 70% last year, despite having a nascent force. Why are they growing 28% in the US if all these criticism off of a very large scale? So it attracts and retains the smartest people, much like when people are attacking your services. Many smart people are like, well, I think we do need an army. Maybe I'll go figure out what challenges they're solving. And so it is like a very great way to continue to attract and retain people. And, I often wonder, when we left Silicon Valley because I had people protesting in front of my house in the mornings and the evenings, I used to joke with foreign visitors, don't bring food. We're going to get the hot dogs and roast them on the flames right in front of Palantir. And we pretty much could do that, by the way. And it is one of the reasons why we are still a company where people doing important things look 22. We have these products that every expert still maligns. And then we have all these tribute bands. If you want to see the most hilarious thing ever, there's like in every city, in every country, there's a tribute band to Palantir. Palantir of cockroach.com, Palantir. They copy everything I do. In fact, I'm now buying wigs. So I'm going to hand them out to all the tribute bands. And that's because of the products we build, the thin criticism, and the disruption, most importantly, disruption of our adversaries and are helping our warfighters. And so I'm very proud of the whole thing. And I don't think most of it's a misunderstanding.
We have time for a final question. Many Manhattan Project scientists later read their work in the atomic bomb. And right now we see many scientists and experts and thought leaders warning us about the rise of artificial intelligence.
The Oppenheimer quote, and I think I was in trouble for saying yes, and he got to criticize building the bomb because he was still alive. AI is potentially very, very dangerous. And if we did not have these really serious adversaries that are willing to eviscerate the rule of law and will change the rule of law and change rights of privacy and are serious and committed to these ideas. It's not even that our adversaries are inherently bad. They have a different worldview for how the world should work. And without an ability to deter them, we will be living like they want us to live. And so if those adversaries would change, and my personal view is invest in AI to the point where our adversaries are like, look, we got to stop this. And then you can reach a deal based on the rule of law.
Okay, I think we ran out of time. I want to thank Dr. Karp for being here with us and share his thoughts, and every one of you. Thank you very much.